Shall we? Yeah. So welcome, guys. Thanks for making it awake at this time of the day. I know it's difficult. Especially thanks for choosing this session. I know I have a very tough competition, so happy to see you here. My name is Gabriele Columbro. I have been working now for Alfresco for 5 years. About 5 years. I joined in 2009. I used to work for a partner first, so I saw, the whole, if you want, the whole process and the life cycle of an Alfresco application. I recently moved from being the principal architect of our consulting services to managing a team of senior support people who will work very closely to engineering to actually improve the experience that you guys have with the release of our product, with the hot fixes of our product, with the, in general, also the development side of things. So this is the reason why today I'm gonna talk around, I'm gonna talk about development and a little bit of delivery. I know that this is a topic that is quite hot. I've seen a few presentations going on, so if you have seen presentation from me in the past, you know that I'm more focused on the development side to start with, but I want to also do some kind of technology investigation today with you guys around the continuous delivery side of things. So I was grown up in the open source. I pretty much never develop on a proprietary product, on those kind of products that you typically need 5 or 6 servers running to be able to actually test your code. So I've always been probably spoiled to being able to do rapid application development. And this is one of the areas in which I think Alfresco over the years has improved a lot. I started with some hiccups, but I think we are right now at a place where it is fairly rapid to develop Alfresco applications. And if you guys have developed already some of those, what are the upsides and the downsides of Alfresco development. Certainly the idea is to be able to be fast in development, but especially I think that's something that I've heard as a bit of a pain, and I felt myself as a little bit of a pain, enable test-driven development and agile methodologies on Alfresco. It is, especially when you're developing Java extensions, complex Spring Beans context, it is fairly complex at this point in time to do real test-driven development on Alfresco. So I think one of the main objectives of these talks is to provide a way, an example of how we can enable test-driven development on Alfresco. Now, it is one of the first attempts to have a full support for this. So bear with me if there might be some hiccups in the presentation that I'm going to show you. The last bit, and that's certainly a new interest from me, as I have now a team that has to work not only on the development side of things, but will also need to be efficient in creating environments, in deploying Alfresco environments, as well as making sure that we have the highest level of automation possible in our team. So the other area that we are starting investigating personally and as a company is certainly providing a way to you guys to cover the full process, not only the development side of things, but also the continuous integration and delivery side of things. And we now have an on-premise version, we have a cloud version, you guys can deploy to AWS, so we need a mechanism, we need a framework, and at least to provide you options to do this in the most supportable and most, if you want, safe way. So this is how I envision professional, modern, agile development. And it's certainly, I'm certainly biased. If if you've worked with me in the past, you know that I have a certain preference for a build technology called Maven. But apart from that, this is a pretty generic description on how a development and delivery process based, what I mean for continuous delivery. So just for quickly going through it, my approach to continuous delivery is based on the Maven SDK, which allows you, we'll discuss it a little bit later, which allows you to develop, configure, unit test, package, and distribute your Alfresco project, including support for amps, including support for share and Alfresco overlays, including support, all the standard Maven features. Can I ask a question? How many guys of you use Maven? Good. So, so this is pertinent. Good. I actually spoiled the next slide in which I was going to ask that, but I was really. So once that you guys have developed your extensions, customizations, Alfresco is a platform, so I assume that a vast majority of you has to develop rather than using Alfresco out of the box. Well, obviously you need to commit your changes in a source control system. That is the first contract, if you want, to move to the next step, the first repository. If you see in blue, these are components, while in yellow you have really repositories, storages, yeah? So once you've done that, you might use SVN, Git. I am a big fan of automation, continuous integration. Obviously, you should do as much as possible to commit working code, but you should delegate long-running tasks to actually a continuous integration server that has to make sure that the unit test, the integration test if you have it, regression test, and potentially a load test, which I think is the last step of maturity, if you want, of a testing procedure. So the continuous integration server will build the stuff for you, and upon successful deployment, we'll deploy it on a binary repository, which is the Maven repository. Obviously, if you're using one of the Maven compatible technologies. Just as a parenthesis, Maven repositories are compatible with most of the build technologies. So you are not bound to using Maven, but I think one of the big values of Maven is to define a clear RPM-like, if you want, repository for artifacts that you can clearly identify in an automated way. That is, for me, the last contract that a continuous delivery, continuous deployment system will use to pull up your customized artifacts, deploy to VM, to physical, to cloud, create stack, configure them with all the potential components that are required to run your application, and even promote them between dev, test, staging, and acceptance. As you might understand, I'm a big fan of automation. So, as I said, quickly, contracts are the key. You have to identify what are the checkpoints, the gates through which your development process will go through. In my case is a version control system, a repository that can be used by the different components to actually exchange source code or binary artifacts. One point that I will like to underline here is the Maven SDK proposes a development model which is fully self-contained, meaning I'm not a big fan of the shared classes type of thing. I think it can have very bad impacts on other applications, and it can have very bad, impacts in terms of change control. People going to servers, change shared classes, in an uncontrolled way. So I am a very big fan of self-contained war deployments. I think Alfresco is a J2EE app. I think that should be used as the, only one artifact that you exchange between, the two sides of the world, development and operations. So, as I said before, in the past it wasn't so easy to do test-driven development in Alfresco. If you know the story a little bit of the Maven SDK, you know that the version 1.0 introduced the possibility of running unit tests. Let's call them integration tests because they require a database and a content store. But to launch Alfresco test outside of any servlet container, so directly using class path dependencies as unit tests should be. On top of that, there are certainly Alfresco features which allow dynamic development. If you guys have ever worked with web scripts, you know that that is pretty much, hot reloading was designed for rapid development. So there are a number of features in Alfresco, in the Maven SDK that can allow that. And as we will discuss just later, the Maven Alfresco SDK 1.1 introduces integration with more, I would say, standard Java rapid development tools like JRebel. We will talk a little bit more about it. So my development environment is obviously based on Maven. As I said before, I've been managing, creating this open source project that is the Maven SDK, which over the years has become a supported way of developing on Alfresco. We have enterprise artifacts for those of you who are customers. And I think right now we are at the level of maturity, and obviously with my team being in support, to actually fully support this SDK. So I just released yesterday night, quite late, the Maven Alfresco SDK 1.1.0. It is quite of an improvement with respect to 1.0.0, especially for what regards the features of rapid application development. So 2 high-level points. It works with the Alfresco Enterprise 4.2, obviously just released. And good news that on top of the Maven-generated documentation, I'm not asking you to read this, okay? You get the presentation. But on top of the Maven-generated documentation, you got now fully documented tutorials on the Alfresco docs. And that's also what, makes me say that this SDK is, going to be supported very soon. Now, it's been a long journey, but as people say, happiness is the journey, not the destination. So it's been tough, but we got there. What are these rapid application development feature and test-driven development feature that the Maven SDK allows? Well, first of all, and I think that's the basic when you're talking about an open source framework based on open source components, is the possibility of running, testing the platform and testing your extensions without any download, without any manual download, without any manual configuration. This is supported already since version 1.0. We actually recently switched from Jetty to Tomcat. As you know, Tomcat is one of the Alfresco supported application servers. So this increases, again, the level of testing that you can give to your extensions. We always supported in the SDK JUnit. Again, it's not unit, more integration, because we don't have really a mock framework there to actually run pure unit tests. And obviously, integrating with IDEs, you have automatic downloads of sources and Java docs. I mean, again, these are things that, for the people who use Maven, are pretty much standard. But if you have worked with the Ant SDK, with the Eclipse SDK, well, you know that you have to attach every single jar to every single source, and that can get really, really painful, especially if you want to do remote debugging, if you want to, really dig into the code and take the most out of an open source product. What the SDK 1.1.0 version introduces is actually something more. As I said, it runs on Tomcat 7, replaces Jetty, but we introduced 2 concepts. The integration with JRebel. JRebel, we will see later, is a hot reloading, Java hot reloading framework. It is proprietary, but there are a number of open licenses that I'm going to share with you. And the greatest thing, it has a very good support for Spring. And you know that Alfresco is based on Spring. So it not only replaces class file, but it's capable of understanding the Spring hierarchy and therefore perform scoped reloading, if you want, of your Spring beans upon classes changes in your IDE. The last but not least, we introduced something that, for the very nature of Alfresco, it is bound to speed up testing, what I think is the key feature of rapid development that we introduced in this rapid and test-driven development that we introduced in this release. And that is the possibility of running remote JUnit testing. More on that a little bit later. One notice, if you guys were users of the SDK in the past, and I promise this is the last time that we do that, we have changed the group ID for Alfresco Enterprise. We have aligned that with Alfresco community. Therefore, now both community and enterprise have org Alfresco. Yeah. Again, I swear it's the last time. It's going to be easier for you in a way that you don't have to change the group ID anymore. And so it is the version that actually differentiates community from enterprise. You know that community and enterprise have always different versions. So that's fair enough to separate the versions. Obviously, to access enterprise, you will need access to the private Alfresco Maven repository. Before we go in a quick demo, couple of Eclipse tips. I use Eclipse. I know it's not the best. I have very good friends who keep on pushing me towards IntelliJ IDEA. I've never found time to actually get productive on that, and that's really the main reason why I didn't switch. We're not endorsing here one or the other, because one of my most fundamentalist thoughts is that your build and all your development process should be IDE independent. Should integrate with an IDE, but should work as well with any IDE that you're using. Yeah. So I'm using Kepler. Kepler is the last distro of Eclipse. It includes the Maven plugin already by default. So it's pretty much you download the Eclipse and it's ready to go. The only one potential extension that you need to add is this connector for a specific Maven plugin that is used by the SDK. Luckily, some guy solved the problem for us. So you can just add this connector, and you should have 0 errors while importing your Maven projects into Eclipse. Now, I'll do a quick demo of the basic features of the SDK, and then we'll move into the 1.1 specific. So let me just switch. Yep. So the Maven SDK, Maven supports the concept of archetypes. Archetypes are sample projects that allow you to, create projects like a stamp, like in a very automated fashion. So if you go to the SDK docs, you'll see that there is a command to create the project. I'm actually going to create a project to launch an AMP, to create, package, and run an AMP. Perfect. Let me just stop my network. Sorry, I had my network off. As you know, what I'm trying to do here is what I'm trying to do here is to download the sample project from the Alfresco repository. So without network, it's a little bit tricky. Now, you can see that you have 2 archetypes here. What we're going to do is creating an archetype to rapid develop an AMP. So you can choose the number, you can choose the version, and then you can select your group ID, which is pretty much like a package, and your artifact ID, which will be your project name. One thing that I want to show you here is that there are some default properties in here. So by default, this is configured to run with Alfresco 4.2e community version. Another property that I want to show you is that this tells you that you are developing an Alfresco AMP. You could change that property to be share, and you will start developing a share AMP. Yeah? So these are support for both of them. That is the property that controls that. Now, we finished the creation of the archetype. We can get into the folder, and we can just run a test. What it's actually doing here, there is a demo component in there, and there is a demo component test in there. What it's actually doing is pulling up the Alfresco context. This is the old way, yeah? This is the way of, pretty much every test creates an Alfresco instance, pulls up the whole application context. So you see that this is certainly good. You're not pulling up a container. It's all automated. You can write tests. You can, debug it. But it's taken a while. So this is not really, test-driven development. If you have to wait for 1 or 2 minutes to actually have your Alfresco running, your test run, well, that's certainly not optimal. You see, it's still running. OK, it's done. It took 50 seconds. Not bad, but I have a super machine. So, I know that enterprise context, not always that's the case. So, we created the archetype. You could have created it directly from Eclipse. I'm going to skip this part for timing reasons. But I'll be at the expert bar just after in case you guys want to follow up on this one. If I have the M2E Maven to Eclipse integration, I can just import existing Maven projects. I will select, where did I create it? OK. He's our guy, just created. Eclipse recognizes it and adds it. As you can see, it's a Maven project. Automatically, all the standard folders are created. We have a couple of demo Java classes, and we have the test that we ran before. Just want to spend a couple of seconds on this test. For now, ignore what's up here. I just want to show you that we are actually using, and that's one of the additions of the Maven 1.10 SDK, Spring annotated tests. So there's no XML configuration attached to this test. We are configuring which application context is used. We are auto-wiring whatever bin that we are needing. You see in this case, we are auto-wiring the uppercase, not service, so that we use transactionally wrapped services of Alfresco. And the test is very simple. It just gets company home and does a count of the child nodes that we know to be 7. Yeah? What I would like to show you as well, and maybe I'll just let it run as soon as while I go on with the presentation, is that changing Alfresco version, it is very simple. Suppose you're trying an upgrade from community to enterprise, or you're trying to upgrade from one version of Alfresco to another. This is the property that you want to change. That's it. If you rebuild, now it will be on Alfresco Enterprise. Actually, there's this other property here, which will say the same, and we are looking to deduplicate that one. But that's actually a property used to run the war embedded in this AMP project. So this is really what's used for compilation, and this is actually used for automatically install the AMP on a test war. Yeah? So I will run exactly the same command that I ran before. Actually, I will run this command, which is, oh, you can see that? Barely. It's a AMP to war profile, which basically installs the AMP on the war that we have just specified. Yeah? So this will run your Alfresco selected version and install the AMP that you are developing on it. So that really gives you the way of doing integration testing, fully embedded, no database required, no Alfresco download required. It's going to all be taken care of by the SDK. While this guy runs, and I'll show you later that it's running, I would say, let's go on with the presentation so that we go and see the cool stuff, yeah? So there are a few hot redeployment options that we can exploit with Alfresco. Now, certainly the easiest one, as I mentioned before, is web scripts. Web scripts have capabilities of being reloaded easily, especially if you develop them. on the repository. But, Alfresco is a Java web app. There are many people developing on Java. So the idea is that there are other ways to actually do that. One of them is OSGI. We don't support OSGI, but there's a project called Dynamic Extension, which is going to be presented, by the way, just in the next session, that allows you to basically build OSGI on top of Alfresco. Let's talk about it a little bit later. What we are going to talk about today is really code hot reloading. It's basically, while you're changing, code gets hot reloaded in the JVM. And that's taken care of by JRebel. Now, the first model, the web script reloading, is pretty easy. Web script can be developed in a specific folder in the repository if you want to make it hot, which is Data Dictionary web script extension. Now, you can easily mount this folder on your local hard drive using WebDAV, for example. Once you've done that, whatever change you made there is already in the repository. And Alfresco will reload the web script. You might have to, reload it via the web script console, but that's done. It really is 2 clicks away to actually see your changes in there. Yeah? This is true for the repository. For share, you might need to define a custom store, which is outside of the class path. Class path doesn't get reloaded by itself. To actually store the web scripts in a well-known location where you can change and gets reloaded automatically at that point. Now, the dynamic extensions, I think it's a really cool project. I really suggest you to go and follow the talk just after mine. Because it not only provides OSGI on top of Alfresco, rather than OSGifying Alfresco, which will be, I would say, relatively complex, but also provides some really nice annotations to facilitate Alfresco web script development, action development, and many other interesting patterns. The cons is that if you deploy that jar in your repository, then at this point in time we cannot support that in the enterprise version because it's not something that we QA, it's a community project. So as long as you use it for development, be my guest. But deploy, if you are an enterprise customer, you want to deploy it in production, you might run into some support risk. Now, there are a few, back to the hot code replacement idea, there are a few technologies that do that. Typically agents or modifications of the JVM. Now there are 2 agents. One is open source, it's called Fake Replace. It is good enough, but it doesn't really understand the frameworks. The difference with JRebel, that is the one that we are actually using, is that JRebel can, as I said before, has support for 70+ Java frameworks. So it really allows you to do a kind of a smart reloading rather than running into crazy issues there. There is a JVM modification called DCEVM, which is driving the hot swap technology. There are talks to add that to Java 8, although it's not really sure yet. Obviously, we'll be following the discussion. If Java gets hot reloading as well, I think we can compete with other more scripting languages. So we'll see. But JRebel is what we have integrated in the SDK 1.0 to actually do hot reloading. Now, what it does is that you can configure a series of resources that you want to monitor throughout, when you have a running application. So you can monitor your classes, your test classes, your web resources that will be automatically reloaded. So really, you just change it in your IDE, F5, and that's done. Now, obviously, you can see the value, I assume, if you have waited for reloads, for a few years. But obviously, it's not free. There's a proprietary license. But there are also a number of, free licenses you can exploit. There's obviously the trial, 14 days. But if you are a committer for an open source project, you can get, a 1-year license. They are supportive of open source contributions. But there's also a social license, which is kind of funny. Basically, you allow them to have access to your Twitter or Facebook account and post "I love JRebel" every couple of weeks. but I'm sure you would be happy. I mean, I would post it myself if they didn't do it. So said that. Configuring JRebel, once you have downloaded it and activated it with one of those licenses, it's fairly easy. It's really just about configuring some Maven ops if you're using Maven, or some Java ops if you're using some other Java application. And then you need to configure your JRebel XML to actually tell him which resources need to be monitored. But we have embedded this in the SDK so that you don't have to do that. And it will be automatically monitoring AMP and WAR resources. Yeah. So on top of this is the basis. This is required to actually do hot reloading. But what we introduced is really the possibility of doing test-driven development by running your tests in a matter of seconds rather than a matter of minutes. And obviously, when you have a huge number of tests, that the difference is tangible. Now, mostly because Alfresco has a very large application context, so this really doesn't go well with test-driven development. What we did is we integrated this JUnit remote little library, which what it does is nothing else than opening a Jetty on top of the application that is run on, in our case in Alfresco. This Jetty will listen on a port. What would he listen for? Well, we'll just listen for the name of the test class, the name of the test method, and the runner that you want to use, the JUnit runner that you want to use. Using the JRebel hot reloading features, what it basically does is that with a custom runner that you can run from Eclipse, you can run from Maven, it will remotely send the test to the running Alfresco without reloading the context, which basically means that you can have a green light in a matter of, or red light, depending on your test, but in a matter of seconds. Yeah. Now we'll see that there are some hiccups still there, but it mostly works. And being this the first release where we integrate that, I thought it was already something that I wanted to share with you, as in why I never done that before. So this is enabled in the SDK with a profile called RAD, Rapid Application Development, which basically automatically configures the Rebel XML and introduces this JUnit remote support. Now, time allowing, let's give it a try. So first of all, I promised, and I'm not even going to check. Whew. I promised that there would be an Alfresco running there. Okay, I didn't do like the magicians. I didn't show that it was not running before, but you clearly can trust an Italian. So here it is. We can have a look at it. You can see that it's Alfresco Enterprise 4.2.0, as promised. Yeah. So in order to run this, to enable, as I said, this rapid application development, we will actually have to stop this guy and rerun it exactly with the same command. Well, I removed the clean just to save time, but with an additional profile, the RAD profile that I mentioned before. Now, it will do exactly the same thing, but yeah, I forgot one step. So, as I mentioned before, in order to configure JRebel, you need to have your Java ops. So I was not, figuring out why it was not monitoring my classes. So I have the JRebel downloaded, it's activated, so I just need to add my, the Maven ops on top of my existing Maven ops. This is what I have now, which obviously gives some memory to Alfresco. I will add this, and so right now we have just the Java agent, yeah? Now we run the command again without freaking out. And you can see that JRebel already brags a little bit about how much time it saved me in the last 2 or 3 days in terms of deployments. So said that, the other thing, you can see that there is some extensive logging around which Spring beans are being monitored. So it's not only about classes, it is intelligent enough to monitor frameworks. Now we'll let this guy start, and in the meanwhile, I'll show you the test that we ran before. Here it is. We can go a little bit more in detail now. As you can see, a custom runner is used. It's called Remote Test Runner. This is the integration that we developed, which actually will try to call the remote Jetty. If it finds it, it just sends the class name, it runs it there, and apart from some hiccups that I will discuss, it should be running in a few seconds, or less than a second. The good thing about it is that if there's no Jetty listening, it will fall back without code changes on running the test locally. So this allows you a very big deal of transparency in terms of being able to run the tests quickly if they're available, if you have an Alfresco available, a centralized team Alfresco, or running them locally. And this is the runner that we pass remotely. One little thing that I want to say here, and that's probably, I didn't test it yet, but you can configure more than one host in which you can run the tests in parallel. So imagine being able to run the tests in parallel in dev, test, and staging, for example, without making sure that whatever version of your build is actually working against those unit tests. I think it's a very interesting pattern. Now that Alfresco is running, and don't worry about this one, I have an issue file for that. I have a conflict on commons logging. I wasn't able to figure it out, but it's not fatal. Alfresco started, so if you have an idea, just contribute on the SDK, which is an open source project, yeah? So once we have that Alfresco running with Jetty listening, just wanted to show you. Should be in there. I can just go to my test, run as JUnit test. Now, the first time, it will have to reload the context. But that happens only the first time. First and second, maybe. But the reason for that is that the Spring auto-wiring and context configuration needs to reload the... What? That's an interesting one. Let me just troubleshoot it. I don't have the enterprise license installed. Ooh. So let me go back to community. Okay. Well, I can comment this out, but that's the one I'm going to change to show that it works. Now, as I was saying before, back to the track. Can't believe it. Back to the track. The first time, it needs to actually reload the context configuration. And so you will have to reload the context, yeah? Later on, this should not happen, and you should be able to change your test in a way that it runs quickly. Now, the first time you make a change, it might take a little bit, like around, when I was doing my test, it was taking around 30 seconds. And so it probably is reloading something internally. Now, obviously, my demo went somewhere else, so we are a little bit going blind here. Let me just see. You gotta wait a little bit here. It took 15 seconds when I did it, just before the demo. Here it is. Now, it has reloaded some of the required bins, the bins that are around, the classes that we changed. Now, from this moment on, we should be able to see tests failing right away. Whoa. Oh, thank you, thank you. Obviously, I can change them back again and hopefully get a green light. Yeah? So, hot reloading of the Java classes. The same thing can be done for your sources. So, I'm showing test-driven, but you can also, you can just run the test, change your sources if the test fails for a real reason, instead of me not having a license, and just go on with it, yeah? You can change your Spring context, and that will be reloaded because JRebel understands these kind of things, yeah? Bitten by enterprise. There's something funny about it, isn't it? So, I'll actually focus on the roadmap a little bit. I think I'm actually running quite out of time. So, we have introduced this rapid development feature. 1.10 was around rapid development. Now, we plan to move forward, especially because, I have now a team that needs to be efficient, and I want them to work with the best technology. So moving forward, I would like to have some enterprise archetypes pre-configured, as well as integrating the great work from Derek and Michael, our benchmark team, to actually automate load testing, as well as regression testing based on Selenium. We have libraries, which I tried to integrate yesterday night, again, that will allow you to just run another profile and have, Selenium testing in regression your Alfresco app. So that's certainly something that, as a completion, as sort of a covering the full spectrum of test-driven development, I want to have in there. In terms of process, I know the documentation has to be cleaned up. As we said, we have now documentation in docs, so I have support from the docs team. It's not just me yesterday night. But other than that, I would like to create a matrix of supported versions in the SDK, since we changed group ID many times, and we changed the layout of the artifacts and of the SDK many times. I want to make sure that there is a clear table that specifies which SDK version is supported with which version. And the next step is going to be integrating with continuous deployment and continuous delivery, as I said. We are moving forward also with Maven in the Alfresco build. We are using that for our cloud deployments. If you look in the POMs in the Alfresco head, now they are valid and working POMs. The full build might still need some ironing because it's not fully used yet for our release process, but we are moving there. So please stay tuned. I'm very interested into orchestrating this to be based on one technology. Now, I have probably a couple of minutes, so the part of continuous delivery is going to be, fairly quick. And please, come at the expert bar if you guys have, questions or hopefully answers to some of the questions I have here. We have, I'm going to go quite quickly in terms of the technologies. If you guys have, ever done continuous delivery, there are different parts of it. You certainly want to do continuous integration. You then want to do, whatever you produced, you want to make sure that it's deployed. It can be on-premise. It can be on the cloud. It can be in a virtual Linux container. So there are flourishing technologies right now. It's a very, hot topic, if you want, with the number of deployment environments that nowadays enterprise application deploys to. On one side, we have, on-premises, old style, if you want, even though they're, very good. continuous integration servers like Jenkins or Bamboo, but up to having full platform as a service, free services like Heroku or Cloudbase that allow you, to have a hosted Maven repository, a hosted continuous integration server, a hosted dev staging production environment. Obviously, they're freemium. They will charge you if you actually run production there. But for a developer experience, to get familiar with all these tools and how they integrate to each other, up to the point that you do one commit, and 3 seconds later, things are tested and deployed in the cloud. I think that's refreshing. On the other side, what we are really investing on is understanding a technology to deliver and install the environment, the components, and all the Alfresco configuration to actually run in a fully automated way, even potentially complex architectures, like cluster. We have 3 tiers now, the database that supports it. So, there are a number of technologies here. We are, as I said, I'm going to be quite brief here, because while on the Maven SDK, we already have a full story out. We are in the phase of a technology investigation here to understand, also from your side, what will be, considering there are so many technologies out there, I really cherish, some feedback from you guys in terms of what technologies you're using to do continuous delivery, if you're doing that, which I assume so. Jenkins, continuous integration server, Cloudbase, full platform as a service, Puppet and Chef, the dynamic duo, allows you to, obviously configure your environment in a declarative way so that you can, share it with your team. You can rerun it for the different environments you're deploying on. We actually are using that internally, both Puppet and Chef. So that's why, again, I would love to get some feedback from you guys. But there are also open source projects that already tried to provide, a Chef recipe or a Puppet script for Alfresco. So maybe that's the starting point. But we can do more than that. There are technologies like Vagrant, which allows you to not only, integrate Chef or Puppet to create and configure your environment, to declare your environment, but also to provision it based on the mainstream virtualization technologies that are available. So this guy will allow you, once that you've run your Chef or Puppet script that is integrated there, to actually spin up VMs from AWS, ESX, VirtualBox, the main VM providers, to actually automatically run what you have declared in your Chef or Puppet script. So again, there's so much, and this is completely open source. And if for those of you who were at the hackathon 2 days ago, Maurizio and Carlo, two of our main contributors, also on the SDK side of things, has started an effort to actually integrate and provide a Vagrant script for Alfresco. Maybe something that we can then integrate in the SDK. So once you built it, you can also run it as a cluster rather than the development mode that I just showed you. This is still open for investigation. I have to say I just did the tutorial, but it's a very interesting technology because it's based on Linux containers, on the new kernel functionality called cgroups, which allows you to basically have bottled sandboxed environments that are not virtual machines. They actually access the underlying resources, sort of like chroot, if you guys have ever used Linux. But imagine again, for those who don't have a super laptop, that would be providing the same functionality as a virtual machine without having to virtualize. Now, what you can expect, we are investing a lot in the SDK. We are making it supported. We will, move soon, and I will be one of the main promoters, I hope, of introducing a full option for continuous delivery for people using Alfresco. And obviously, that's also a little bit selfish because now I'm on the engineering support side of things. So if you guys do things better, at the root, I don't have to, clear it up when it comes and blows up, and it hits the fan. So I really, would be interested to hear your feedback. Yeah. So I hope that complements the effort that we have done with the SDK in the next, 3 to 6 months to actually get us, all to a happier road. Yeah. That would be all for me. I have 2 quick questions. One of them you already answered. How many of you do use Ant? Okay. How many of you use Ant and Maven? Okay. And do you guys use Puppet or Chef? Say Puppet? Chef? Okay. Okay. Slightly more Puppet, but not that much anyway. So that's all for me, unless you have questions. But you can come to the expert bar. We're just around here if you have any doubt or if you want to make fun of me for not having the license.